What's up next?
You look like a brutal but beautiful dictator from there. You look great. What's up next for me, though, is DVI, Disaster Victim Identification.
Right. And what, so...
I know. So that's full on, isn't it? So these guys are among the best in the world at this.
My God.
Yes.
Do they go global to
disasters?
Yeah, right.
And then how do you come home and cope and get back to your family? And these are the questions I have. And what sort of work have you done overseas?
So I went to work at the University of Glasgow for 2.5 years as a forensic pathologist, but also to get some special training in forensic neuropathology, so the brain examinations. But through my work here at VIFM, we're quite lucky. We do a lot of work with the Australian Federal Police. So I've been able to go to Thailand after the tsunami to help with victim identification, to Christchurch after the earthquakes there. Wow. But also from time to time we provide forensic services to the smaller Pacific nations because they don't have forensic pathology services. So I've done work in Nauru, which is particularly unpleasant, Vanuatu and the Cook Islands. And recently I just did some work in Samoa with the WHO. So we're really lucky here because we have the opportunity to provide services to places which otherwise they just don't have that forensic expertise.
Yeah, it's just a really certain kind of person, certain kind of brain, if you don't mind my saying so. I envy the person who gets to have a look at your brain eventually because it's a certain kind of brain who thinks that's lucky.
I hope that's a long way away.
I'm sure it is, but it's a certain kind of brain that thinks that's lucky, that thinks you're lucky to be able to go to those places in those circumstances. I mean, most of us would rather never find ourselves in those circumstances.
Well, one of the privileges of being involved in particularly some of those large victim identification exercises is it's a really multifaceted approach with lots of different team members, and you know everyone kind of works together because the common objective is to identify these people and give them back to their loved ones. And it's actually a real privilege to be involved in that effort, and you know people go above and beyond to do what needs to be done under sometimes really quite trying circumstances, but it's really a privilege to work with those people and to ultimately, if we're successful, get the deceased back to their loved ones.
Hello, my friend, how are you?
Meshel, lovely to see you.
You too. Would you mind telling us, please, your name and your job title?
Stephen Cordner, and I'm a forensic pathologist, head of international programs here at the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine.
So what is it that you do? Because I hear that you are Mr. International, and the thing that I have learned since I've been talking to people here is the international significance of this place. I know that when there's an international disaster, this is the place people call when they need experts. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well look, you and everyone listening probably knows the word forensic means things to do with the law. So forensic medicine, medicine and the law. And there is international law. So we're an Institute of Forensic Medicine for Victoria, so we look after that for Victoria, but there is law internationally that needs medicine to help its implementation. So there's the International Criminal Court.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that has law and it sometimes needs medical evidence. So we've had Soren Blau here, our anthropologist, go to the Congo for exhumations for the International Criminal Court. Identifying people is a legal obligation. In war, hundreds of thousands of people dead. People don't realise there's probably a dozen wars going on in the world now where the cumulative total is over 100,000 and in some cases millions. So Syria, 2 million. And so identifying those dead is a legal obligation.
Is it really? I don't think we realise that.
No,
we understand that in war people die, and we see on the news all the time bombings and people are dying in Syria. I don't I did not know that.
No.
We need to
well,
identify them.
It's a legal obligation which is poorly observed.
Ah.
So the parties to the conflict have legal obligations under the Geneva Convention to identify those bodies. Of course they don't.
Right.
And in time that will become a crime. Probably wouldn't get you to the International Criminal Court at the moment, but one day something like that will. But anyway, there's a whole setup run basically by the International Committee of the Red Cross. There's also an organisation called the International Commission of Missing Persons. There's the Red Cross internationally, which is trying to do whatever little bit it can to identify those people. And that is the space where, to the extent that we've got the capacity to do so, we try and get involved.
Yeah, but you also, while you're there, and also the other people who work here, while you're there, you're training people there to be able to carry out this work when you leave.
And the best solution to this is that local people have the ability, have the resources, which of course they don't have any, to at least contribute to the solution, if not actually lead the solution to this problem. And that's a fantastic thing about the Red Cross, which is, so we really go at the request of the Red Cross in these situations. So as well as war, they also respond to disasters. So things like the Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, the huge earthquake in Nepal, the Ebola crisis in West Africa, the cyclone Nargis in Myanmar, 2008, 120,000 people dead. Just numbers that are actually total approximations, but always under approximations in my experience.
Yeah. Is that your passion? This international sort of aiding communities who can't do it?
Is one making a difference? That's a pretty big question, but you sort of feel that it does need people to think about how you might go about fixing this. And it's not just a matter of the locals dealing with 120,000 dead. You actually need lots of people to have been thinking about how you might deal with that in a practical way. So actually the answer is the locals, not necessarily experts, the local people. And your listeners might like to think, actually, they can be part of the solution. They might like to think about how you can use new technologies to, because everybody's got a phone, take a photo of the deceased before he or she decomposes.
Oh, okay.
Get a photo that is recognisable. How could you get that into some sort of system where family who have survived might be able to see that photo and therefore know the terrible news that their family member is dead? Whereas at the moment, the situation is one of 100,000 decomposed dead bodies that are simply swept up, really, and buried in a mass grave, and you wouldn't even know as a family whether your family member is dead. You wouldn't know where they were, you don't know what's happened to them. You spend the rest of your life wondering, hoping maybe that somehow they've survived, but they're away somewhere for some reason. It's in that sort of space that these solutions are going to lie, not doing what we've been doing for the last hundreds of years.
Yeah.
For example, within the Black Saturday bushfires, people are unsure about where their loved ones might have been, for example, and indeed, unfortunately, the event is so devastating to a body that we don't always have all of the individual. And so we rely on, say, the police to find items, might be bits of jewellery, bits of bone sometimes, so we have to reconcile all that to try and put together who the individual is that we found, because they've been so destroyed by the effects of fire. And the same with the plane crash. the MH17, is that because this plane has fallen out of the sky, being hit by a bomb, people are not in a state that we can just look at them and say, oh yeah, there's Mary Smith and so.
But your professional standards are incredibly high. I mean, so much so that you are flown around the world. You're going somewhere today, I know, to help people to manage their mortuaries better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. We're fortunate that the Institute of Forensic Medicine has a really outward look, whereas some places have a really inward look. So I've been fortunate to travel right around the world, seeing mortuaries, working in different mortuaries. And yeah, today I'm flying to Sri Lanka to assist with hopefully improving the mortuary environment there, because they really have so few resources and what we can do to assist with them.
So I'm Michael Polanin. I'm the Chief Forensic Pathologist for Ontario in Canada, and I lead the medical legal death investigation system within the larger coronial apparatus in Ontario. And one of the sort of main overlap areas that has been championed by Stephen and myself internationally has been the whole issue of humanitarian forensic science. And that is a very interesting application of forensic medicine to the problem of the missing. And it's very simply stated, and that is that at times of internal armed conflict, at times of war, gross violation of human rights, but even natural disasters and some domestic terrorism and other events, there will be a subset of the population that goes missing. And there is this huge imperative, both from society and from the families, to know the fate of their loved ones. Some of those people will eventually be found alive, but many of those people will be found dead. And they present themselves, in fact, as unidentified human remains to the death investigation systems. So really the problem of the missing is to try to identify those people who are unidentified and present to places like VIFM as unidentified human remains, and trying to link them up with those people that have gone missing. And that is relatively easy to do when you're in a domestic context with advanced technology and good police investigation and stakeholders which are cooperative. But when you go to unstable post-conflict societies or societies where conflict is ongoing, and you have, perhaps non-functioning governments, rule of law is difficult, humanitarian organizations are taking the lead, and then you don't have all of the resources that you would normally have at your disposal, the problem of the missing becomes very difficult. And so that's one of the aspects of humanitarian forensic science. There are other parts of it too, like death in police custody, have people been tortured, what is the long-term consequence of torture? There's a whole bunch of other things, but the problem of the missing is one of the major issues that overlaps with the VIFM and my organization, the Ontario Forensic Pathology Service. And we do that largely through work with the International Committee for the Red Cross, where Stephen and I are on the Forensic Advisory Board.
So what can you tell? I know that, for example, you have gone to war zones and worked where there's mass graves. What can you tell from that? What's your purpose there?
Many forensic anthropologists also have a background in archaeology, and so rather than working in pyramids and gold and that sort of thing, we have skills around how to interpret a landscape. So it might be a question of, is that blob in the landscape actually evidence of someone trying to dig a grave? So we use a whole range of skills to help detect anomalies, what we call anomalies, and then we know that you can have an anomaly in a landscape from gardening, for example. We know we've disrupted the the integrity of the soil. So we need to then decide whether that hole or that anomaly actually contains forensic evidence. That might be a body, it might be drugs or weapons, etc. So we then have specific skills to recover and interrogate that anomaly. So rather, anyone can dig a hole, but what we try to advocate is that in investigating that anomaly with specific techniques, we can provide additional evidence. We don't have to take 50 hours to move soil unnecessarily. We can work out where exactly a grave was actually created, and so not dig elsewhere. And then obviously work out if it is an individual or individuals, the anatomy, how they were lying, whether they've got ligatures, whether you've got more than one individual in the grave. And
so
you
potentially you could help to locate a mass grave, potentially a war crime.
Yeah, no, I mean it's an incredible privilege to work in contexts where I guess people feel that there is going to be impunity, and I think, obviously the politics is massive, and there are, instances, circumstances where a huge amount of work is done and there is no justice, but often the justice for many families is identification. So, rightly or wrongly, it's not in a court of law, but for many people, having their loved one returned and identified is, as you can imagine, incredibly important.
Who'd you see?
Okay, disaster victim identification.
Yes.
And yet again, I just find myself thinking, how are these people? They're superstars. They're international superstars,
yes.
Yeah. And they're just so humble and just quietly working away in central Melbourne.
So sensitive. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good on them.
I know, amazing.
Did you ask how they cope?
I did.
What did they say?
Various ways.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their different way of doing it.
Yeah. To me, when I went there, not to that place, but it's a very supportive workplace.
Yeah.
Everyone's aware of what each others are dealing with.
Yeah,
So they're very sensitive to each other.
Yeah, I'm sure that helps.